This episode of the Party Loaded podcast is proudly sponsored by Audible.com. Check out their awesome catalogue of audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from. And be sure to grab a free audiobook on us and support the show by visiting audibletrial.com/endgame.
Let's party.
Hello, and welcome! Hey, hi! It is Tuesday, the 22nd of January. It is the evening, which means it is time for the Party Loaded podcast. You may not think that it is time for Party Loaded because it's Tuesday instead of Wednesday. We're getting the drop on it slightly early this week, but that is okay. We're still here to bring you everything great in the world of video games, and we have three of us here tonight. I'll kick off by introducing myself. I am Luke Retallick. We also have Christian Paulson Brown, Mr. CPB. What's going on?
Pleasure to be here, as always, Luke.
Absolutely. And we decided to mix it up a bit tonight. We have a returning guest on the show from, I'm going to think, maybe 2 years ago. It's been a little while, but back in the saddle to grace us with his presence once again, we have Mr. Mark Isaacson. Welcome back, Mark.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we had you on way back when you were sort of getting involved in the podcasting world through the PN2 podcast. And these days you're doing more of the writing side of things. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know a little something that I want to sort of just kick in with straight away. You wrote a book last year, didn't you? Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, it was like a mix of poetry and short story, and I put it up on Amazon, and I think one person bought it. But you know what? It was an experience. I made 5 cents off of it. It's fine. It's okay.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you can claim now that you are a published author. That's a tick box.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely going on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Not to mention some cool article stuff that you've been writing on our parent site at channelengum.com. So if you want to check out more of Mark's musings, you should go and hit that one up and look out for more stuff to come as well, which would be cool.
Mark's musings is actually a pretty good like title.
Oh fuck, man.
Yeah. Let's copyright that right now.
Yeah, you got to pitch a column or something. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we tend to kick off every show with some musings on recent gamings. So as the guest, Mr. Mark, why don't we fire it off with you tonight? So what have you been playing lately that's of interest?
Does anyone remember Destiny 2? I don't know if anyone knows that game. It's a very sort of niche title. I actually got back into it recently because they have Forsaken, which I was kind of dabbling with. Maybe I should play it or not, because I was a long time Destiny 1 player. I started Destiny 2 and got to the end of the story, and I was like, well, that was a game. Mm-hmm. And then I just sort of left it for about a year or so, and decided, I think like 2 weeks ago, to get back into it just to see what all the fuss was about with all the new stuff, because apparently Forsaken is really good.
Question for you. Did your sort of desire to get involved in the game again coincide with a certain company leaving the embrace of another certain company? Was that just something?
No, actually, it was like a week before that, so it was good timing.
So you caused it.
I probably should have just waited for that.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I ask is because that's what actually prompted me to jump back in last week. But continue, please.
Oh, there you go. That's all right. Yeah. I finished the main story campaign. So spoilers: Kate Seeks died, and we had to revenge him, and I did. So that was great. But it's actually probably on par with what they did with Taken King, which was the expansion from the first one. Very story-driven, but also very sort of fan-servicey in a way, with the way the characters interact. The fact that you have a fan favorite involved, stuff like that. Played really well. I felt like it could have been maybe a little bit longer, but in terms of that main story, it was decent enough. The aftermarket stuff, so the extra stuff they're doing now, which is part of the new season pass, which is what they're doing with, I think it's Season of the Forge or something like that.
Yeah, Black Armory is the first bit.
Yeah, Black Armory. I've only just started to dabble in that. It seems to be one of those things where it's a lot of kill this, kill that, et cetera, which is traditional with Destiny. But no, it's genuinely nice to get back into it. Like, I've always felt that Destiny had the best kind of action to it. The controls felt really crisp. The guns were really effective. It was really fun to play. It was just, having played Destiny 1 for so long, Destiny 2 just felt like more of the same, maybe too much more. So maybe that 1 year break was worth it. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'll keep going though, definitely.
So you didn't actually kick off with Destiny 2 when it first launched. Then you only jumped in
no,
for
I
the
did.
first time now. Oh, you did. Okay.
No,
so
I
break.
jumped straight from 1 to 2 as soon as it came out. I was all over it, but I think within 2 weeks of finishing the main story campaign and waiting for everything else to eventually come out, like the raid and so forth, I kind of just felt like, I don't know, I felt like it wasn't worth being a sequel. It felt like more of a general expansion to the first one, and maybe that's the way they should have gone. Obviously, they didn't because of Activision, but I don't know. We'll see. But
I agree completely.
Yeah, I think Destiny 2 should have been just a continuation of Destiny 1. Whether they do a Destiny 3 2020, maybe. I honestly don't know if they should. I think they should just stick with what they've got, and just carry on with the seasons as they're doing it now. But no, it is nice to get back into it. It's a fun world. I love the lore. I love the characters. Godspeed, Kate 6. But yeah, that's probably been, apart from maybe New Super Mario, which I've kind of dabbled with on my Switch, which has actually been sent out for repair.
Oh, your Switch. What's wrong?
My Switch. So it's a launched console. I bought it on day one, and I've loved it ever since. But apparently, according to my Nintendo rep, the screws on the back of the console were a bit too tight in the production, and it caused, when it overheated, well, not overheated, but heated up, it caused little cracks along the top of the back casing. So thankfully, it's covered under warranty, so I'm sending it out to them to do that now. So I'm without my Switch for a week, which is kind of a bummer.
Actually, I'm vaguely remembering around that time some of the launch Switches had some problems with battery swelling. Was that a thing that I am recalling correctly?
I think so. I don't remember exactly, but I know there were issues with like around the screws or around the power button, for example. There were cracks appearing along the top. It only happened, I'm going to say, about 6 months ago when I first saw it. I didn't even realize it had happened. I was just sort of playing around and I noticed it and I was like, oh, that's cool. Thankfully, it hasn't gotten any worse since I last saw it anyway. So I knew it wasn't going to be a major issue, but it was nice for them to say, yeah, we can repair it. Yeah.
The only battery expansion issues I can remember were people putting in like third-party batteries or like extendable batteries that caused some issues.
Yeah, I might be misremembering. I do remember there were some issues with the launch switches. There was definitely a
Joy-Con issue.
Yeah.
And there were some people saying that the dock was scratching their screens, but that's just them being reckless.
That's right. Yeah.
Basically.
That's like people when the Wii first came out saying that the Wii controllers were forcing them to collide with chandeliers and things in the house.
Throwing them through their TV.
Yeah. Entirely the console's fault. Yeah.
So speaking of games that are better than Destiny 2, Warframe.
Hold on here.
He's going to try and sell you on this, Mark. Just strap yourself in and just let it wash over you because he's going to do a pretty good job.
I've talked about Warframe a lot, so I'm not going to do a whole big pitch thing here. I just wanted to focus on a few aspects of how Digital Extremes handles the community aspect of Warframe that I wanted to bring attention to. So there are a couple of really cool initiatives that they've got. One of them is called Tenergen, and it's like a crowdsourced skin system that they've got where they have a free design tool that you can download off Steam, and then you can actually use the same kind of developer tools that they use to create new skins for the Warframes. And then they have like a round of competitions where you can vote for the custom skins that you like, and then some of them get selected and put into the game, and then you can only purchase them with real world money, so you can't use the in-game currency, but 30% of the 70% of the revenue goes to the creator, and Digital Extremes gets 30%. So it's a huge share that goes to the creator, and I think it's a really cool way of like bringing in community involvement, and it's purely cosmetic. So the fact that it's real world cash isn't a big issue, but I think that's a really awesome idea. It kind of reminds me of some of the promises that have been made with Beyond Good and Evil 2 with like the music thing. But this seems to be working really well.
So is there a limit to the number of them that you can create? Because I'd imagine if there's that much on offer for the people who are sort of working on them, one approach could be just to scattergun it and make, hundreds of new skins and hope that some of them, stick. So
I don't know if there's a limit, but it's because it's all done by community voting. It's fairly cutthroat. Like I've only been playing the game for one round, but you pretty quickly see like a top 10 basically emerge from however many are submitted. and then they're the ones that it's kind of like vying between. I'm not sure how many you picked in the end. It might be something like 4 or 5 that are picked each round.
Oh, okay. So the only ones that actually make the store are the ones that get voted. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. It's just that there's a Steam workshop that has all of the submissions in. It's like Steam Greenlight basically, but just for Warframe skins.
Mm-hmm.
And then the devs host the competition, and then the ones that win, they're the only ones that go into the game. So it doesn't like pollute the game with tons of crappy looking skins. It just the best ones actually make it in.
That's a genuinely clever idea.
Yeah, it's cool. And then there's another thing which is Guides of the Lotus. So it's like a system that they have where if you're a veteran of the game, you can be chosen by Digital Extremes to become like an ambassador for new players. So you need to have had at least 800 hours of playtime. You can't have any like warnings for like moderation warnings. And then you basically get like purple global text chat, and you get like a unique like icon and unique armor that really like stands out. And then your job, or like your role, is to hang out in the global chat and like help new players with their like first time experience. I just think it's a really cool way of leveraging the community, building like positive interactions with the community, and also rewarding the players by giving them like unique armor and unique icons too.
That is really cool. A lot of other games could use that kind of approach, but I think that the one danger with it is that because you know, with the purple text chat especially, you're kind of in a way endorsing that player's behavior from that point onwards. And if they do end up going rogue, then it's a particularly bad look on the game.
I think
you have to moderate that really well.
Yeah, I think it's worth the risk though. Like if incidents do occur, they can then manage that. But I don't think it's the sort of thing that they should be afraid of for that risk, because the positive just thing outweighs that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is they have a system called Design Council, and it's a rotating group of 25 players a month that are handpicked to get access to a exclusive forum where they can communicate directly with the devs, and they'll get the devs will have like polls and questions that are specifically for the Design Council, and it's like a way of kind of elite players that have been around for a long time communicating directly with the devs, giving them responses on how they feel about like upcoming content and having some input into the development of the game. And it started as a reward for like founders. So when the game first launched, they had like a founders program where you could, if you paid real money, then you got like exclusive rewards. Now that's over. So now it's just people that have had like really good contributions to the community forums and zero warnings. They can be like eligible for the Design Council.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think it's just really, really neat. And I think it's just like, it's representative of how Digital Extremes as a whole treats this game, where it's such a passion project for them. There's absolutely no stink of like corporate like publisher influence and anything like that. It is an independent game, so you really feel like there's this direct connection between the community and the devs, and there's so much love in the game. And yeah, I think it's just really, really cool.
Yeah, nice.
And it's always sort of flown under the radar as well. Like it's been going for what, how many years now? 5, 6 years or something?
6 years, yeah. But the player base has doubled since Destiny 2 came out.
Wow.
Because I think there's tons of people that jumped to Destiny 2, were disappointed, and they were looking for another like sci-fi loot shooter. And then there was a whole community waiting there going, Warframe.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. A really good place to point to get a bit of the backstory behind the Warframe journey is the no-clip documentary that Danny O'Dwyer's done on it as well. That's a real good watch. So
yeah, it takes you through the story of how they wanted to make the game for like 15 years, but they couldn't get any like funding for it. And then there was a game that came out, Dark Sector, on like PS3, and it was like the game that they were forced to make by the publisher when really they wanted to make Warframe. But there's like the tiniest little bits of continuity between Dark Sector and Warframe. Like the characters that you play in Warframe are called Tennos, and the main character in Dark Sector is called Hayden Tenno. It's just like little links like that.
That's clever.
Yeah.
And then there's just one more little game I wanted to mention that I played this week. Tiny little thing, not even a finished game. It's called The Heroes Arrive in 35 Minutes. It's just a free download off itch.io. And the only reason I know about it is because I listened to a new podcast that started up called Wooly Will Figure It Out. and it's just a podcast this guy hosts, and the topic of the podcast is failure, where he talks about like failed ideas he's had. He gets on guests to talk about, failed concepts that they've had or how they've learned from failure, and like kind of spinning failure into like a constructive force. And one of the concepts they talked about was this game called The Heroes Arrive in 35 Minutes that he did end up scrapping the game entirely, and he's just dumped what he made on itch.io. And it's basically like a character creator where you play a villain in like a lair, and then you have the heroes are coming, they're coming to the castle, they're going to reach you in 35 minutes. And then you have a bunch of different actions that you can take, like different things you can do in your castle. It's all text.
Okay, so it's almost like a riff on the old concept of Dungeon Keeper sort of thing.
Yes, it is, but there's no like real-time strategy or anything like that, or like turret defense or anything. It's purely on the creation side of a character. So each action that you do, it influences what your character is. But for example, you can choose to look at a family portrait. And if you look at the family portrait, then suddenly the hero that's coming to fight you, you're actually related to him. And in the family portrait, you're in there with him. And so it builds the story of your villain as you interact with the game. And there's like another one where you can go to the top of your castle and stare at the moon. And if you do that, then suddenly you're a werewolf, like you're a lycanthrope. and you can kind of mix and match these different actions, but each action that you do takes a certain number of in-game minutes. And once you've used up 35 minutes, that's it. Your character is created. And then there's like a really basic like JRPG battle where the hero and the villain like talk to each other and have some dialogue. And it's all like based on the choices that you've made, like how the final battle plays out. It's super conceptual. Like it's I wouldn't really recommend it because it is an abandoned project. So it's the barest skeleton of a game. But as an idea, I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that does sound kind of cool. It's probably timely as well because a lot of people around the world are going to be doing the global game jam real soon. So this is the kind of thing that could come out of those.
It's the kind of thing that would come out of a jam. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned the podcast was done by Wooly. I assume this is Wooly from ex member of Super Best Friends. Is that
yes, that's right. Yeah. So since that channel's ended, they've kind of spun off and started their own. They're like focusing on Twitch more now, but they've got their own projects. And yeah, Wooly's doing his own podcast, which is all about failure, which I think is kind of interesting because it did start after the collapse of their channel, and I wonder how much it was inspired by like the failure of their channel and like trying to rise from the ashes of that. So yeah.
Oh well, work with what you got, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my week.
All right. Well, I had one bullet down next to the games played this week for me, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. It says Luke goes back to his comfort food bullshit. So, long story short. And it is a really short story. So Jam is not here tonight. She's not been feeling particularly well the last couple of weeks. She's fighting off the cold to end all colds. But during the brief moment over the weekend that she was actually feeling well enough to jump on and play games with the rest of us, she decided to start up her Minecraft server again. And I got suckered into that shit straight away. So, the crux of the push this time, I think, was that not that long ago, they actually added new creatures to the game, particularly pandas, which reside in these new sort of bamboo jungles that are apparently somewhere, but they're like a rare biome. So I get the impression that the major goal is at some point to kind of, gather together as a group and go and find that somehow, but I don't know how easy that's going to be. It seems like it's going to be a super mission to go and locate them. Mimo had a good crack at it the other night, and she failed epically. So, but of course, what's actually happened, as does with all new Minecraft servers, is that everybody's just sort of disappeared into their own navels and building crazy projects again. So, I'm currently constructing the Babylonian hanging gardens and zoo sort of inside the structure as well. And I don't know, everyone else is working on their own bullshit. And yeah, Minecraft is just super comfortable food.
Minecraft will never die. It's like one of those games that will just kind of like Tetris. It just always keeps coming back.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of a regret last year that I kind of got suckered into Minecraft for as long as I did around the March sort of April period of the year, because there's a few things that I probably in hindsight would have preferred to jump in and play that were more new. But you're right, like it's such a friggin' good game. I just cannot stop loving it. Yeah, no matter what.
Yeah, it's one of those bread and butter games that you it's always just there as like a staple if you need it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it works really well on Switch. I can attest to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a mixed group now where some of the people are actually jumping on using Switch and some people are playing on PC. And those that are using Switch are just jumping on using Discord on their phone app and just having their headphones plugged into their phone and communicating that way. So it's a weird hybrid solution, but it seems to work and everyone's having a great time. So why the hell not? I say.
Yeah. The less we talk about Nintendo's voice chat options, the better.
Oh, shudder.
Yeah.
Maybe 2019 will be the year where they finally do something about that. We can only hope. So, fingers crossed there's a direct coming soon. There's usually a big one in January. We haven't heard anything yet, so I don't know.
That's been rumored for like 2 weeks now, and still nothing's happened.
Yeah,
I had the funny feeling that it might have been postponed for some reason. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think people were thinking it's postponed after they kind of dumped some news on Twitter. Like they announced the release date for the Yoshi game and that Dragon's Dogma was coming and just a few things that could have been packed into a direct. So maybe it's been delayed. Well,
their directs these days tend to be fairly sort of themed directs where they focus on like a particular franchise a little bit and talk about multiple projects to do with that franchise. But I mean, not always. They do some combined ones. Like the January one, if I recall correctly, is usually a bit more of a this is what we've got planned for the next part of the year kind of thing. But yeah, who knows? Anyway, that's sort of getting into news territory. So why don't we just pop the cap on that and we will chat about the news.
Now it's time to hear some gaming news. Time for some gaming news.
All right, gaming news of the week. I think that probably the big notable event that occurred just off the back of recording last week that we need to jump in and chat a little bit about is the Mortal Kombat 11 reveal. So, yeah. Mark, are you a MK fan? You dabble?
I literally just finished Mortal Kombat X over the weekend with the story mode just to play around with that because I hadn't actually touched it for a while.
Okay. Well, but before I dig into the new stuff, where is the Mortal Kombat story at, in your opinion, hot off X? Is it in a good place or
it's in a better place than where it was at the end of Mortal Kombat 4. Let's put it that way. If you can remember that far back.
9 was kind of a soft reboot of the story, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was basically going back in time. Essentially, it was like
I think from memory
it was. Do you remember how they had the Mortal Kombat games on the I think it was the 360 or the Xbox, the original Xbox?
Ish.
There was like 3 of them. I think it was Deception or something like that.
Yeah.
And they had the story on that, and it ended with, from memory, everyone died except for Raiden. And Mortal Kombat 9 soft rebooted at the same point where Raiden then goes back in time to try and fix his mistakes, and that's how it sort of goes on from there. So they kind of fix some of it, but by the sounds of it, and I'll let you explain it now, Mortal Kombat 11 sounds like it's going to reset even more. Yeah,
well, I mean, time is kind of the central theme again, it seems. So now I know nothing about the recent Mortal Kombat sort of stories. Like, my knowledge of the game, characters particularly, is pretty much Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3 era and the movies, of course, which, we certainly shouldn't look to as canon, because especially not the second one. Good God, what an abomination. But yeah, it seems that the big sort of event that's occurred is Raiden turning evil, and now he's killed one of the major characters called Shinnok, and the characters that we haven't known about up until now, which control time in the universe, have now gotten involved and decided that no, they're not happy with that, and they're going to reset everything again, or at least try and stop Raiden and all the other characters that are involved. So 2 new characters that are being introduced, one of which at least is a playable character, is Geras. So Geras is going to use time control abilities as he fights. So he's going to be able to, use powers to teleport himself, drop traps on his enemies, stop and rewind time, which, allows him to hold people in place while he punches them. Apparently he can, create things made of rock and sand in battles. That kind of ties into a whole hourglass sort of theme, which is interesting. And the other character, which is not confirmed whether it's going to be a playable character or maybe an endgame boss or just a sort of narrative device, is Kronika, which I actually kind of like the name, I must admit. Like, as far as a time-based character, Kronika's not terrible as far as names go.
Well, so, at least it's not a ninja, so,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she does feature in the new trailer, though. So you can get a bit of a look at her. She looks like a very sort of sparkly, feminine kind of, made of suns and stars and weird kinds of stuff. So, yeah. It's as bloody and gory as ever. Like, there's been tons of stuff over the last week showing all the new fatalities and, crazy shit, left, right, and center. I think probably some of the notable ones I've seen is Sonya Blade kicking a character up into an Apache helicopter that she summons, and basically the rotor blades do the work at decapitating the character. There's all sorts of weird, like, freezing and burning enemies and kicking their faces off and all sorts of shit. It's Mortal Kombat. You know what to expect. If you're surprised at this point, gruesome. You're playing the wrong game.
Baraka's fatality as well. If you guys haven't seen that yet.
Oh, the face one? The face off?
The face one.
The one that would make John Travolta, like, wince in his... I was going to say his grave, but no, he's still alive. Maybe he won't after MK11. Anyway, so, yeah. Mark, you describe it, because this thing was pretty epic. It was interesting.
It was kind of like, so you were mentioning face off. That's essentially what it was. You basically rip the face off, then rip the rest of the head off, and then basically eat the brains like an ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
It's tasty, maybe. I don't know. I've never had brains. I can't attest to that, but for me, that was one of the standout fatalities I've seen so far. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty gross. So, I mean, in terms of mechanics, there's not a whole bunch to talk about. It seems that they've got, the system that they explored a bit in Injustice 2 with regards to, cosmetic adjustments to the main characters. So, you can, for instance, have Scorpion and change the types of masks that he wears by unlocking various different bits and pieces. Don't know how that's going to work in game, but that's kind of cool, like being able to alter bits on the characters is, one of the sort of progression methods in the game. So you presumably be able to change the way that his grappling hook looks and some of the animation with that and that kind of thing, which is cool. They've still got all the fatality stuff in there. They've still got the X-ray moves, which they had in previous games, which is kind of like when they sort of zoom in on a particular finisher or high-powered move and showing like bone shattering and that kind of thing. It appears that that's still in there, but it's being changed into what's being called fatal blows. So when like a character has a health meter drop below 30%, they can unleash a fatal blow by pressing the shoulder buttons. And if it connects, it's like a once per match thing. But if it doesn't connect, then they can try it again, but there's like a big cooldown before it becomes available. So various different bits and pieces. If you're interested in all that Mortal Kombat stuff, highly recommend you sort of do a bit of a search online, because there's lots of bits writing up the stuff that was leaked. And apparently there's going to be another live prezzo on the 30th of this month as well, covering off whatever's left. So but that comes out soon. I think it's April coming.
It's April, but I think the Switch version might be delayed until May from what I'm hearing.
Okay. So it's going to be out on all major platforms. So PC, all three of the major consoles. So should be cool. That's a fairly gory game for the Switch market. It's going to be interesting. I don't know if there's anything...
You can't say the Switch is the kids' console anymore. Come on.
It's not, but it still has an air of being at least a bit toned down. Not after this, I guess.
It's got Doom on it.
Yeah.
Well...
They had Doom on it. They have Wolfenstein on it. Gone are the days when Nintendo would edit stuff and put in green blood instead of red.
That's true. Yeah, Doom's pretty much up there, I guess. Okay, you make a good point.
So, speaking of bloody messes, Atlas...
let's say
some funny segue ever.
Funny shenanigans happening in Atlas this week, where some unscrupulous people in a group called Black Butterfly, they managed to hack some out of place objects into the game, including tanks, whales, and airplanes, and basically just got up to all sorts of random shenanigans in this pirate game in their World War II tanks and their fighter planes. And it was just pretty hilarious, and kind of showing a bit of a security flaw. The developers claimed it was because an admin account had been compromised, but then they had to shut down the server and do a rollback. And then a second incident occurred where the same thing was happening, but this time they were spawning dragons as well, which is pretty cool.
Oh, good.
And then this time Grapeshot Games, the devs, did admit it wasn't a compromised account. It was like an actual hack. But they've said that they have fixed what caused it and it won't happen again. But who knows with Atlas, because it does seem to be a game that's held together with strings. And that kind of gives an impression that it's probably pretty vulnerable to exploits like this.
Yeah, I mean,
it sounds a lot more fun with tanks and dragons, though.
Dragons are not out of place. This is a very fantasy kind of setting. There's lots of mythical creatures in it already, but tanks.
Right.
Yeah.
You have fantasy tanks. Warhammer's got them, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
I mean, you've got cannons on ships, so I guess it's, not a far cry from that. But I don't see how a tank would really help anybody in a game like Atlas, because it's mostly naval travel. Unless the tanks are floating, it's not really going to help. It's going to stick to the bottom of the ocean. So
I wonder if it's indicative that they are building a World War II game, like another Ark-based game.
I don't think so, because I mean the interesting thing is that Atlas have just made the mod tools available over the last week for people to go and sort of mod their own stuff onto their own private servers. And it's a big thing with Ark Survival Evolved as well. There's like mod stuff that has been available since very, very early on. It seems to be one of the big appeals of the game. Now, personally, I think it's way too early to introduce that kind of stuff because they've still got to work on getting the core components of the game a bit more sort of polished up, shall we say?
Or working, maybe?
Yeah, and this may be evidence to that. But I don't know. I still think the biggest issue with the game, especially the official servers, is that they're just overpopulated at the moment. They need more official servers, is probably the biggest thing.
Yep.
So
yeah, it could just be like just fun tools that someone's just like one of the devs have just made and stuck in the back end somewhere that wasn't supposed to come out. But
yeah, could be.
Yeah. Another bit of news. So just some like business interest. So there was a investor call from Netflix, and in the investor call, they said that I'll read the actual quote here. We compete with and lose to Fortnite more than HBO, Netflix said. So I just think it's interesting to note that a major entertainment icon like Netflix is talking about how a video game, Fortnite, is one of their major competitors, and it's not something that they can kind of compartmentalize and say, oh, we're competing with the TV brands like HBO and Hulu or whatever, and then there's video games over here, and that like in this day and age, it's all about dominating like just screen time. Everything's on screens in people's homes, and video games are as much of a competitor with like video services like Netflix as anything else. Yeah, what do you guys think?
I would entirely agree based on what I just did last weekend.
Yeah.
So I was going to start playing a new game and I didn't because I binge watched about 8 episodes of The Punisher instead. So new season 2 came out and that severely impacted my gaming time. So I am living proof that this is definitely a thing. So I wonder if Netflix is actually more susceptible to that than other networks that have like a weekly schedule for their shows. Because when you think about it, like a single episode or something, like when Game of Thrones starts up again, for instance, that's not really going to heavily impact on someone's gaming time so much, but trying to binge watch a show before it gets spoiled online for you, that absolutely will. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting that they're actually talking about it in the same vein as TV now. That just shows you how far we've come. Like,
yeah.
That conversation would never have come across like 5-6 years ago, even with Call of Duty being at its peak.
No, definitely.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's long gone are the days where like the kid was playing Nintendo on the floor and then, mum and dad were watching TV later. It's all just one big hodgepodge now of entertainment. Everyone's playing everything and watching everything.
I thought the other interesting part of that article, I sort of read down to the bottom of it earlier, and they mentioned that one of the things that's being taken into consideration more and more often now is like various different games companies, big publishers. And last year's a great example of this, where everybody tried to like get the hell out of the way of the Red Dead Redemption 2 release and sort of pick other months of the year and other time slots to launch games. And games that launch too close to that are too similar could inevitably suffer quite a bit from the split focus away from their brand. It seems that same thing's happening with some of these big TV launches as well. Like Netflix would either deliberately try and avoid a time of year where they know a huge game release is coming out, or the games companies might conversely look at when there's big TV events happening and try and avoid those for the same reason. So
that's
kind of
super interesting. Like Game of Thrones in April, you're saying that might not compete as much because it's one episode a week, but I still wonder if that's the kind of thing that would be factored into like game launches. Do people want to compete in April with Game of Thrones launching?
Yeah, well, the big example they were talking about from last year was Stranger
well.
Things. Like when the second season of Stranger Things came out, they saw a remarkable drop in game purchases across that weekend, across some of the launches of the time and other ones that have been tracking strongly to that point. So yeah, I think it's a real thing. I really do think that's worth them thinking about. There's probably only a few TV sort of shows that would do it, but the ones that would do it would definitely have an impact. So there you go. That's
yeah. And speaking of large sums of money, something fun happened today as of recording, which was there's a YouTuber named Harry Brewis. I've seen his videos pop up in my recommended because he does these like reasoned defenses against, or like reasoned argues against like far right stuff. But he was doing a marathon stream of Donkey Kong 64, and I don't think he entirely planned for it to blow up as huge as it did. And it was intending to raise money for trans rights, particularly in the UK. There's a group called Mermaids, I think was the biggest charity there. And he ended up raising $340,000 for trans rights, and attracted a whole bunch of attention from some pretty big names. And it was a fun old time. Went for 57 hours, and kind of just blew up. And some of the biggest people who dropped by, my favorite was John Romero, famously from Doom and id, and he just popped in and just quickly said trans rights, and that was basically it. And then people have now been making all sorts of memes about the Doom Slayer being an ally and that sort of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like trans rights tick, demon rights cross.
I want that on a shirt. Holy shit, yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then a huge up and coming politician from the US, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has just recently announced her bid for presidential runnings in 2020, and she stopped by to voice her support, and told an anecdote about her playing Nintendo 64 and showed her flexed her gamer cred. It was pretty fun time.
Yeah, this
I believe
reminds
she
me
called
of?
Nintendo 64 the best console.
Yes,
I'd like to agree with that thing on the record now.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that. Hey, it certainly holds a special place in my heart. So
Yep.
I think it's a contender. I can't really shout its virtues because I'd never owned a 64. Shock horror. I missed that part of the cycle, ashamedly. But look, I think it's awesome because I recall around this time last year we had a very similar event when we had the whole sort of Ninja Drake stream that happened and pushed down into the mainstream again. It's almost exactly 12 months on, I think, since that occurred. So
this kicks that ass though. So
yeah, absolutely. I think for impact's sake, absolutely. But that's cool. That's super cool. All right, well, let's round off tonight's news with something a little bit lighter, and I want to talk Hitman 2 for a second because there's some new updates coming out for this awesome game, which was Mr. Matt Dyett's Game of the Year for 2018. We should mention. So there's going to be a winter update coming out that sends you back to the Hokkaido map, which was in the Hitman 1 of a couple of years ago. So basically, it's themed around the Snow Festival. So it's new content sort of coming to the game for all players, and it's including the first add-on for the expansion pass owners as well. And basically focused on a new mission where you go back to Hokkaido. You're trying to take out a factory owner named Dmitry Fedorov. And the mission's going to be available for the duration of the seasonal event. And it's live now, I believe, and will run through until February 12th. So there's a bunch of additional gear that unlocks as well. So you'll be able to get like a sports pack, which contains some winter sports stuff. So like a winter sports suit, quick draw climbing gear, which you can use as a garrote as well. There's like a climbing baton. And a snowball. So apparently, I mean, given that most things you can throw in this game are lethal, you're probably going to be able to kill dudes with the snowball, which I think is kind of cool. So Hitman's so good. That's the first of many expansion packs coming out, apparently. So people playing that game can continue to enjoy it. And I'm sure that the next elusive target must be not too far away because, man, those things are cool. Looking forward to the next one.
They've only had 2 elusive targets so far, haven't they?
I think there's only been one for Hitman 2. There was the Sean Bean one. And
Sean Bean. I think there was another one maybe start of last month. I completely missed it though.
They mentioned one. I didn't think it had happened yet. If it has happened, I'm going to be really annoyed at myself. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It could have. God, I should pay more attention. Anyway, so yeah, bit of Hitman stuff. Still a great game. You should check it out if you haven't played it already. So
yep, agreed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's all the news. So Christian, take it away, my friend.
Yes. So our main topic for tonight, we're going to be having a bit of a roundtable discussion and compiling a list of the most influential games of all time. So this isn't a list of our favorite games. This isn't a list of the most successful games, like highest sellers, anything like that. This is the games that we think have had the most influence on the industry or the wider world. And before we get into naming games, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, how you actually approach this, what you actually think, what makes an influential game. So I'll throw it to you, Luke. What do you actually think makes an influential game?
The whole reason why this topic sort of came up recently while we started chatting about it was an offhand remark on a show about apparently people thinking that Fortnite was the most influential game of the current decade. And I got really thinking about that, and I was considering, well, what actually makes that the case? And I think it's probably a combination of things. I think it's, if you're to look at the kind of lifeline of a lot of games out there, you can almost sort of drive them back to a point of origin, which is usually like one game that sort of kicked off the style of build that they are, or the genre, or the, I guess, big themes that have sort of come to pass. Some stuff I think is super influential because it's sort of hit the mass sort of media and become general public knowledge, and Fortnite's probably a good example of that, if we're being real. And we were just speaking a moment ago about that Twitch stream last year where Drake got involved on a Twitch stream out of nowhere that Ninja was running, and that kind of made Ninja in a big part the star that he became last year, and sort of pushed him into the spotlight. So it's those kinds of events that I really think speak to a game hitting a level of influence that is abnormal and really stands out to other things in the industry. So I think there's a bunch of different ways it can happen.
But you, Mark?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, a lot of the games that I was looking at in terms of putting this list together was more a case of, okay, what game maybe influenced a design decision, something that would be taken across from other games for another generation or so, or even today. What game maybe influenced a maybe existing genre that had died out and just came back through that game, stuff like that. So, a lot of it can be revolving around all of that. A lot of it can be going back to the 80s, stuff like that. But I do agree with Fortnite as well, though. I think that the thing with Fortnite, the way it's influencing the market is the way it markets itself, essentially. It's the fact that it's a free-to-play game that has a cheap buy-in, if you want to have it as a buy-in. So much easier to get into than a $60, $70 game that then has a season pass, and then has another season pass, and then has another season pass. And yes, I'm talking about Destiny 2 again. It's going to have a huge impact on the way games are going to be marketing and selling themselves for the next couple of years, I'd say, just how successful that's been. So,
Yeah, I think you hit on something that definitely factored into what I consider influential, which is like a lasting impact. So I think that for me, influential games are games that they blow up and they do, extend outside of the gaming bubble, which, these days isn't actually much of a bubble. It's kind of encompassing the entire world, but there are still pockets of people out there that don't usually interact with gaming, and some things do break through that barrier. But then it also has a lasting impact. So it's not like a flash in the pan. So an example of a game that I wanted to kind of lead off with, because I thought it might be divisive, is Pokemon Go, because that's a game that I feel it blew up in an incredible way, but I don't think it's had much of a lasting impact outside of, not that we've seen yet, outside of itself. What do you guys think about Pokemon Go?
I mean, have you seen how many clones there are on the iOS and Apple and Android stores? There's a lot of games that are trying to mimic it. So it has an impact on that front. I don't know. I don't know if it's influenced that much, though. I don't think it's had that much of a lasting impact just yet. It's still early days, but like free-to-play games are probably more common on mobile platforms. We know that Diablo is going to be a mobile game. I don't know about that one. There's so many other games that will probably fall into that category now that might follow Pokemon Go, maybe in a different way. So maybe not as influential as I think they maybe most people expected to have been. Definitely had an impact in terms of a wallet. We'll say that.
I think that Pokemon is actually a really good example to compare to Fortnite for one particular reason. And that is it the game itself that is the impact, or is it what it's derived from originally? Because when you think about it, like talking about Fortnite being, an extremely influential game, what about PUBG, and what about prior to that H1Z1, and then the next thing prior to that? Like, you drawing back through its genesis, one wouldn't exist without the other. One could argue. So, where do you draw the line as to where the influence began? And, I think, there's an argument to be made for Fortnite in a lot of other areas too, because I think that, it's had a big lasting impact on a number of other factors, including, Epic Games now launching their own store, which could be a big thing in years to come, including, the rise of that kind of content on Twitch, including, the rise of the way that they've marketed the game in particular. It's like a unique thing that's kind of risen them above the competitors. And Pokemon's the same sort of thing. Like Pokemon Go, there's a lot of other games that have kind of come out since, which are derivative of that concept. Like there's the Ghostbusters one that has come out not too long ago. There's a Harry Potter one which was in the works, which I can't remember if that's come out or not, where you can actually use augmented reality to capture sort of mythical creatures, Harry Potter style. But if you want to make the argument of what came first, is it Pokemon Go that we should be looking at, or is it Ingress? Because Ingress is kind of the genesis of that. Was that in fact where the influence actually began? So I don't know.
It splits off, right? Because you're focusing on the Ingress part of it, not the Pokemon part of it.
Yeah.
So I do think that when you're talking about like this cause and effect, you do have to draw a line, because you can go back basically ad infinitum until the start of video games, because everything is influenced by something else. And I think that for clarity's sake, I think it's good to focus on the games that blow up. Like Ingress did exist. Ingress influenced Pokemon Go, but Pokemon Go influenced the industry in the world. So I don't think it's which games influence like the next step, but which ones influence the whole broader picture.
Yeah, so I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, excellent point. Definitely something to consider. But so I think from this conversation, we can pin Fortnite in the top 10, do you think, most influential games?
I don't think it's necessarily top 10, but I think it's definitely in the discussion.
All right, so we'll pin Fortnite in there, and I think we'll drop Pokemon Go, because I don't think it has had a top 10 impact.
All right, if you want to talk mobile games, I'd like to throw one into the ring then.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we should talk about Angry Birds as a potential entry.
Do we have to, though?
Really? Angry Birds? I had not considered Angry Birds.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about it, it was a game that absolutely blew up and pretty much paved the way for early monetization of mobile games. People actually started considering, paying for games on their phones as a result of Angry Birds first and foremost sort of blowing up the way it did way back when. And that has since, spanned massive sort of different franchises in terms of Angry Birds being available as board game, as card game. It's got its own feature film. There's been a sequel to the game, which isn't necessarily as big, but there's been tons and tons and tons of clones of that thing. It was one of the highest earning mobile games of all time, and that made huge business news at the time, which sort of, promoted an industry-wide focus on spending on mobile games, and a lot of other sort of investors getting involved with that otherwise wouldn't have. And, I think in a lot of ways you can draw a lot of that activity back to the genesis of a lot of the indie scene at that time, because mobile games were kind of the catalyst for what's come later and become like a bigger indie scene on other platforms. Mobile game development was a very, very safe entry level for a lot of those companies that kind of, established their foothold and then built from there. So I think there's a big case for Angry Birds being on this list, personally.
I hadn't thought about it at all, but I do actually kind of agree. It is kind of platform defining for its time. It exploded, and you had I remember seeing Prince Harry wearing an Angry Birds hat at Wimbledon and like crazy stuff like that.
We don't have to like it for it to be influential.
No, not at all. Although, I wouldn't be talking about Fortnite, but What do you think, Mark, about Angry Birds?
I completely forgot about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And now you've reminded me, and now I feel bad. No, it was definitely influential for its time. I don't think it's probably had as long a lasting an impact as Fortnite might have. But yeah, in terms of early days, it definitely had a huge impact on just getting people into the mobile space in the first place. Up until that point, there was a couple of games out there they did well, but nowhere near as well as that.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of mobile games that, countless mobile games that wouldn't have ever existed if it wasn't for the confidence that title's success led the industry. So, yeah.
Well, that's fair.
So, Mark, what is another game you'd like to pitch to us, to sell us on as a most influential game?
Well, you guys have been talking about more recent stuff, so I'm going to go a little bit further back. Anyone remember Counter-Strike?
Yes, absolutely. Counter-Strike.
So this is one of the first big first-person shooters that, in a way, took realism to a whole different level. And since then, like even after the first couple of years, it was still very big. But even now, years and years and years later, it's still being played. It's still considered one of the best first-person shooters. Maybe not as well played or as popular as an Overwatch or Fortnite, but its impact was a big, big thing. Like it took a genre and took it away from the science fiction styles of Quake and Doom and gave it that sort of element of realism, but still made it playable. It also then influenced esports, apart from maybe StarCraft, which I guess is a different conversation entirely. It was one of those first games that really did start that conversation of competitive video games.
So I have StarCraft on my list, and I think we should battle it out between these two games for which is more influential. So,
all right,
because I think StarCraft did have a bigger impact on esports, especially in Asia. It's still like the biggest esport in the world, other than League of Legends now. But I can see how Counter-Strike had a wider influence outside of esports. At the time, the only kind of modern shooters that you had were like Rainbow Six, but that was, nothing to compare to Counter-Strike. And most shooters at the time were World War II shooters. And I think it's only really after Counter-Strike, that you saw like a switch from World War II or historical shooters into modern shooters. So I think maybe we wouldn't have even had Modern Warfare if we didn't have Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I think Counter-Strike's impact was far more reaching than what StarCraft was. StarCraft was mainly South Korea, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And I know obviously a lot of people still play it to this day, but I don't think as many people will be playing it right now compared to a Counter-Strike.
What do you think, Luke?
It's an interesting comparison to StarCraft, and I see where you're going with the esports element, but I would actually put StarCraft against other games of the RTS genre when it comes to the type of thing that it's influenced, and maybe not compete with Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike's a weird one because I think you've got that sort of social influence angle to it, but you've also got that style of game where I'm just trying to think of the shooters that would actually be more of a benchmark in terms of what Counter-Strike has actually meant for the genre and the industry in terms of what people expect from an FPS. Like I'd be thinking back to other influential games like Halo 2 probably being more influential in this regard, because Halo 2... Yeah, I mean, Halo 2 definitely wasn't the best quality game in the Halo series. I mean, and it in terms of the impact on Microsoft and Xbox, Halo Combat Evolved, you can make an argument for that kind of setting the standard and being the big launch title that kind of built their brand in the early days. But Halo 2 was the one that really started to push the PvP aspect of the game and had all these new competitive modes and online play, and it was really the sort of herald for that standard of gaming. And I don't think that Counter-Strike would exist without what Halo 2 sort of managed
Counter-Strike was first.
Counter-Strike came before Halo 2, though.
So Counter-Strike was 2000, wasn't it? When was Halo 2?
Counter-Strike was 99.
Yeah, Condition Zero was 2000.
Okay, well, maybe that's a good point then if I've got them reversed. So, okay, interesting. And there was a Call of Duty game, or was it Modern Warfare, that was one of the big heralds of modern day shooters as well. Like I'm not super familiar with the...
Battlefield had the Desert Combat mod that was really popular. That was a mod for Battlefield 1942. That was the first multiplayer modern shooter I can remember playing. But yeah, I think Counter-Strike, from my perspective, did have a bigger influence than Halo 2. Halo 2 is huge, no doubt. Halo itself is a juggernaut franchise, but I think it was kind of an evolution of couch co-op shooters. Online, its influence on online and Xbox Live was massive, but I don't know. I think that I put Counter-Strike above Halo 2 there, and I'm going to cut StarCraft off the list. I've been convinced that's not worthy.
Okay. Well, in terms of shooters, would you put like a Counter-Strike above something like a Doom or a Wolfenstein 3D or even a GoldenEye?
No, I think I put Doom on my list, and I think it's a separate beast.
Okay, all right.
I arguably would because of that esports impact. Also, Halo 2 came out in 2004.
Okay, all right, there you go. You've successfully made that case.
Let's pivot on to Doom then, because I do think Doom deserves a spot as well as Counter-Strike, because Doom was such a big impact, not just on first-person shooters, but also on like the theme of like the themes in video games and like the kind of edgy 90s-ness, and like it is the kind of one of the first games I remember that like my parents wouldn't let me play because it was too violent. And that and kind of Mortal Kombat. But I think Doom had like a bigger impact on the sort of mind share of what was happening in video games in the 90s. What do you think, Luke and Mark? What do you guys think?
Yeah,
I think in terms of the violence aspect, definitely.
Yeah.
The theme and the narrative sort of elements, I definitely agree. In terms of the style of game, obviously Wolfenstein 3D being the precursor, it has a lot to say about, being an influence on Doom, because there wouldn't be a Doom without that. But I think Doom more directly has gone on to, ensure that we saw things like Duke Nukem 3D and Quake and Blood and, probably later on even games like Half-Life, perhaps. So it's hard to argue with. That Doom's got a special place in my heart as well, so I'm maybe a little biased here. So, yeah, perhaps. I think there's a very strong case to be made. It's certainly not as cut and dry as some other ones, I think. It's very tough because there's a lot of similar games of that era that have actually had a big impact on the industry as a whole. So if you bundle them all together into one whole, we could probably just, put a bow on it here, but you kind of have to pick one, don't you? So, yeah.
I mean, if you're going to pick Doom based solely on how it impacted in terms of violence, you put that up against Mortal Kombat, wouldn't you?
Mortal Kombat, I think, did have a bigger impact because that was the one that was highlighted. I can't remember the court case in America, but that was actually taken to court for its violence, basically. And the ESRB was founded on the back of the discussion of Mortal Kombat. But I don't know. So I actually at one point did have Mortal Kombat on my list, but I did cut it because I felt that influence was too isolated, that violence aspect. Whereas I think Doom had some of that plus such a huge influence on first-person shooters. That and like that Wolfenstein 3D, yes, that was before, but that's that kind of cause and effect discussion. It doesn't occupy the same place in the pantheon of gaming as Doom. I think
I would definitely concede that. I think Doom is much more of a hallmark from that era, for sure. Yeah,
that's fair.
So I'm gonna leave Doom in the list until it fills up because.
Right.
So are there any just complete like softballs straight through the net, mix my metaphors as much as I want that you think like are just winners?
Mario Brothers,
yes,
surely.
Super Mario Brothers. Do you disagree, Luke?
Yeah, I think I can let that one through. Super Mario Brothers.
You do mean Super Mario Brothers, not Mario Bros, Mark?
No, Super Mario Brothers. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. We'll lock Super Mario Brothers in because I think that game basically almost saved the video game industry, especially in the United States after the market collapse in the mid to early 80s. So, and of course, just the impact on gaming as a whole. So,
if you want another one straight through the net, I think we have to throw Minecraft through as well. Yep. Any objections to Minecraft?
No, I'm cool with that.
For all of the reasons that we've previously mentioned, that game has just been one of the largest games ever. So, yeah.
Now I'm gonna throw one that I think is an easy win, but I can see somebody disagreeing with, and it's Wii Sports.
No, I completely agree. 100% agree. Yep. I was gonna say it. So,
what do you think, Mark?
I mean, it had a massive impact at the time. It helped usher in motion controls, at least for a little while. I think its biggest impact was probably opening up video games to a broader audience, at least at that point in time. It was still sort of considered a niche market, even compared to now. So I feel like that's probably on the edge of the top 10, maybe.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're always, at the time, you saw these news articles of people in retirement homes playing Wii Sports and families playing Wii Sports together, and it did explode. And it, like you say, motion controls and ushering in the new era for Nintendo. And I mean, I definitely think it deserves a spot there.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree with me.
It did bring in a new
Mark
era, but
better
the
than
new
I
era
could have.
died pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, I'll take one from you guys now. Luke, name a game.
All right, let's have the Metroid battle.
Really, Metroid?
All right. Yeah. All right, let me hear it.
Okay.
Well, tell me.
Okay, so you
hold on. Which Metroid are we talking about here?
I'm going to say OG. Now, Super Metroid is arguably the greatest game ever made, but I'm not going to say that because that's entirely my bias. I think that original Metroid, it probably deserves a spot because not only is it the defining game in that entire new genre of Metroidvanias, of which there have been countless examples since that time, I would put the influence far, far greater on the Metroid side than the Castlevania side because there's a reason it's called Metroidvania and not Castleroids. So, because that sounds like a terrible disease you would never want to be afflicted with. All right, so basically it was a defining game in terms of the sci-fi genre at the time. It was a defining game in terms of the Nintendo console because it never had sort of been known for getting into some of those hard, sort of edgy sci-fi sort of shooter-type games, apart from things that were much more rudimentary. In terms of it being narrative-based and the length of the game and the level of complexity and difficulty, I think it heralded in like a new style of challenge when it came to those sorts of games. It was, a defining game for that entire genre of platformers. I think the number of things that have taken influence from it is absolutely staggering. And, it's still a quality game to this day. Like, it holds up. You can go back and you can play Metroid and not be disappointed. It's still a phenomenal ride. So I think that for its impact, its influence, and its lasting sort of, I guess, iteration that has kind of grown from it throughout the industry, it's worthy of a spot. So,
in case anyone asks or tries to pit Metroid versus Castlevania, Metroid came out August 1986. Mm-hmm. Castlevania came out September 1986.
And I came out October 1986. So
there you go.
I don't think the timing's even really that relevant because the influence wasn't felt immediately. It was felt sort of a little bit down the track. Like, it took a little while for it to gestate perhaps, but it's definitely had the effect over time. So
that's a real edge case for me. And I don't think I personally agree. I can see the influence it did have on creators, but I don't think it extends far beyond that. Like, Metroid as a franchise has never been a particularly top seller. It's not something that I think has leaked out of the gaming industry very much. But it definitely, was very influential in its genre. So I'm kind of struggling with it because I can see its influence, but I'm not sure if it's top 10 influence.
Would you argue that the only reason Metroidvania is popular now is only because it's been in the last maybe 5-10 years and not since Metroid came out?
No, I don't think that. I'd agree with that at all.
I think we're seeing a renaissance of Metroidvania for sure because of the pixel art sort of indie scene. But I don't know. I almost feel like, despite it being a prequel, Super Metroid I feel is more influential. Like, I know, that's so tough to split hairs there, but.
Now, I'll place myself aside for a second and say, now I know that I'm extremely fucking biased on this one. So I'm willing to concede it on that point alone. But I definitely think that it deserved to be discussed at the very least and considered, even if it doesn't make the 10, because I think it's an extremely influential game. So
I think there's a lot of people who, I just at a guess, I would say a lot more people played Super Metroid than ever played Metroid. I think there's a lot of even Metroid fans that you can ask, and they'll say they never actually played the original. They only played the later games. But that's just speculation. So, I mean, we still don't have 10 games yet. So I'm going to put it on there, and then we're gonna see if it lasts.
Sounds good. All right,
Mark, what do you got?
I'm going to go with a different platformer, Spelunky.
Spelunky.
So Spelunky was a freely released game on Windows back in 2008. It wasn't the first game that did procedurally generated environments or permadeath, but it was the game that brought it back into consciousness. Like, in terms of every other game that has done that since, so especially last year with Dead Cells, for example, is a perfect example of that. Everything always seems to come back to Spelunky. And the fact that there are so many games that do that procedurally generated environments and the permadeath, even Dark Souls, I think Spelunky should be on the list.
I need to admit, I never played Spelunky.
I don't think a lot of people did. I think at least the original one, I don't think as many people may have played it as much as when it was released on Xbox Live about, I'm going to say 2-3 years later, maybe, when it was re-released.
Is it an Xbox exclusive?
No.
It's been released on pretty much everything.
Okay. Just pass me by then.
I will say three things about Spelunky. Number one is I have played Spelunky and I love the shit out of it. It is a very, very good game. Number two, I would say that it was an extremely big release and did extremely well and did sort of promote the indie industry quite a bit at the time it was released. Thirdly, I would say that if you think that Spelunky is getting on this list ahead of fucking Metroid, you are dreaming, son.
If Metroid gets on the list before Mario Brothers, I'll be concerned.
So that's fair. No, I think this kind of falls prey of the thing we were discussing before when it comes to iterative games. So Spelunky is not necessarily remarkable on its own. It's gone on to, encourage a whole bunch of other similar games of its nature. But I think in itself, it's not remarkable enough to rise above, if that makes sense.
I think I agree. I mean, again, I never played it, but that kind of maybe speaks a little bit for itself. Not to like toot my own horn a bit, but I think I've played a lot of games, and I didn't play Spelunky, and maybe that says something. But I do think that I do know of it having a bigger influence on like the indie scene. So less so on like Metroid was more about defining a genre. I think Spelunky was kind of like kickstarting an indie revolution along with a few other games. Like I'd mentioned Limbo as a possibility as well. I think Limbo had a huge influence on the on like the indie revolution and these kind of like atmospheric platformers.
Yeah, that's the crux of my argument. Is the fact that if Spelunky hadn't come out when it did, especially in that mix of Xbox Live finally taking off, I don't think the genre or the indie scene probably would be as good as it is today.
Yeah, Braid as well. I'd put Braid and Fez are all kind of around that same time.
Yeah.
Rogue Legacy.
Another
one. Yeah.
I think Rogue Legacy, you'd probably even be a better argument for that than a lot of these other ones, if we're being fair. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough. They are all very, very good games, but maybe the impact of what they have done has not been entirely felt yet. We might look back on them a bit more differently in the next 5 to 10 years. So
that's 9 so far. So let's get 10, and then we'll start cutting things off. So I'm gonna go back to the early 80s here, and I'm gonna pitch Pac-Man because Pac-Man Fever was not to be messed with, and the like arcade domination at the time. I think Pac-Man is the poster child for that.
I would agree.
I can't argue with that. I honestly can't argue with that.
It's one of the most identifiable characters that has been marketed ever. It's a hugely commercially exploitable icon. It's appeared in a whole bunch of things, cartoons, books, probably on friggin' lunchboxes and kids, coloring, books and things like that as well. It's become a mascot for the video game industry, essentially. I don't think you can really argue Pac-Man. That's a huge one.
But the less said about Pac-Man 2, the better.
Dude, all Pac-Man for the Atari 2600.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's a nice 10. So now we get to the fun part where we start hacking off limbs.
I think, we need to keep adding things and cutting as we go. So
absolutely, yeah. So let's get another one from Mark. What's your contender to make its way onto this list?
Look, let me just throw a quick one in there that I didn't actually originally put on my list, but I should have. Tetris.
Fuck yeah.
I had Tetris.
Tetris. If you're going to have Pac-Man, you need to have Tetris.
But the Tetris effect, man, that's a huge,
I know, right?
huge deal.
So good. But okay, so we'll put Tetris. But here's the other one, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this because I actually have two that's going to compete against each other to get on this list, if possible. Is it going to be Street Fighter 2 or Street Fighter 4?
2.
I have Street Fighter 2 on my list.
Yeah.
So
here's my argument. Okay, Street Fighter 2, obviously massive game, kickstarted an entire industry, if nothing else. Influenced the genre, everything was backed off of that. However, if it wasn't for Street Fighter 4, pretty much the fighting genre would have died in 2008 before it came out. That's how bad it was, especially in Japan. The arcades were shutting down because there hadn't been a proper fighting game for almost 10 years before Street Fighter 4 came out.
Yeah, but that could have been occupied by any other successful fighter game after that point.
I just want to say as a side note, Mark and I, we haven't talked much, but the fact that you know this about fighting games, which is something that like a passion that I share, and like that's something that I know about, and this dearth of fighting games, you had the awful Mortal Kombat games coming out and terrible games like Biomutants and shit like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you for being a kindred spirit here.
You're welcome.
But I would still say that despite saving fighting games, I think Street Fighter 2 had the bigger influence. We had Street Fighter 2, we had Street Fighter 2 the movie, we had Street Fighter 2 the movie, the game, as awful as it is. And I think that it spawned so many clones. Like fighting games did exist before it, obviously, but everything mimicked Street Fighter 2 after that.
Yeah.
And
okay, well, in that case, all right, so Street Fighter 2 in my head, in my heart, Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, I would say Street Fighter 2 above 4, and I would also say Street Fighter 2 above any of the Mortal Kombats. Personally,
yeah. So we've got Tetris and we've got Street Fighter 2. So what are we cutting here? So I'll just quickly run through them. We've got Doom, Super Mario Bros, Fortnite, Minecraft, Pac-Man, Wii Sports, Angry Birds, Counter-Strike, Metroid, Spelunky.
Wii Sports.
Really?
Yeah, I think I don't.
Over,
I mean,
over Metroid?
oh, no, I would have Tetris or Street Fighter ahead of Wii Sports, without a doubt. So I think Wii Sports should be out of the 10. Just saying.
What about you, Luke?
I think Spelunky needs to go.
No.
I would concede that Metroid's probably not going to hang when we start adding a few more games, so I'm happy to cut that now.
I think we're going to have to go on like a two versus one kind of rule here. So what do you think about Wii Sports, Luke?
Let's keep it for now, but I think it may get edged out as we continue to add a couple more key things. So put it in danger. Put it in.
Put in the danger zone.
Put it in the danger zone.
So we've got. So yeah, I'd obviously vote in favor of Wii Sports. So for now, it's okay. But you said no Spelunky, and I would agree with that. So we're going to cut Spelunky, unfortunately.
Dang
Sorry,
it.
Mark.
All right, whatever.
Yeah, I'm happy to offer up Metroid as well. I think that the
and Metroid on the chopping block.
Yeah.
All
so that gives us a little bit of
just
space, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will pitch to you then, Luke, to name the next game.
Okay. It was a tough call for me between two titles, but in the end, I'm going to go with the original Metal Gear Solid. Now, the other one that I was contending between was this or Tomb Raider. Now, the reason being is because it is the first big sort of heavy narrative sort of 3D puzzle action platformer that sort of came out around that time. It was a big influence on the industry in terms of cinematic storytelling. And a lot of games have kind of taken a cue from that, as games have developed in the years following. So, you look at all of your massive titles of recent years involving sort of open exploration of game levels and sort of combat and weaving narrative into that as well. We wouldn't have games like, Uncharted. We wouldn't have games like, even things like
Siphon Filter,
Horizon Zero Dawn, more recent examples, or your Assassin's Creeds as well, are really kind of driving back from original games like that. I think that Metal Gear Solid above Tomb Raider purely because it did more with what it had, and it has... I mean, you could argue both of them pretty strongly, I feel, because they've both gone on to have many successful sequels. But I think that in terms of the way it was built, and particularly the stealth mechanics and the combat, Metal Gear edges it out just a little bit in terms of the complexity of the mechanics and the narrative aspect. So that's my take on that.
I've got some thoughts on that, but I'll pitch to you first, Mark. What do you think on Tomb Raider versus Metal Gear Solid, or them, in general?
I think in terms of overall impact, Mortal Kombat, Metal Gear Solid over Tomb Raider any day, honestly. Tomb Raider is a great game. I didn't really play the originals. I played all the more recent ones. Metal Gear I've dabbled in a lot, but I think in terms of that impact on narrative especially, yeah, definitely Metal Gear. All
right, so I will cede this because I do think that Tomb Raider is more influential, but I think it comes down to what we're talking about at the top of the segment of what we're actually defining as influence, because I think that Tomb Raider had a bigger impact on the outside world of gaming with, like 2 movies now for Tomb Raider.
Three
Croft,
movies.
3 movies now? Yeah, 3, sorry.
Not
Lara
that we remember
Croft
half of them.
became this icon, and she was on the cover of so many gaming magazines. She was this like sex symbol in the 90s. And I even remember seeing like bullshit like Today Tonight news articles about how her proportions were so unrealistic, and they wheeled out some poor scientist to talk about how her back would snap if she was real. And I feel like Tomb Raider occupied more of the sort of mind space in the public than Metal Gear Solid, but for its influence on video games, sure, Metal Gear Solid, I agree. And it's 2v1 anyway, so yeah, Metal Gear Solid over Tomb Raider.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of people outside of gaming versus people in gaming. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have argued that Tomb Raider had actually a negative impact on the industry because of the fact that it was a female-led character, sure, but the sexual representation of that character for a long, long time influenced the industry in a bad way. But that's just me.
That's a pretty good point, actually.
I agree. We didn't kind of load influence with like a value at the start, like a value judgment at the start of the segment. So that's a really interesting dimension to bring up. We're talking about positive influence or negative influence.
Influence is influence, I think. So
yeah, I think we're going to have to try and keep it neutral. But that is an excellent point that I do agree with entirely.
That's for the next podcast.
That's for the next podcast, yeah. But so if you guys want Metal Gear Solid on there, what are you going to cut?
Wii Sports. Oh, we've already done that. Never mind.
No, we haven't. It's still on there at the moment.
It's still on there? Get it off.
Luke,
Metal Gear versus Wii Sports. Fucking, you're killing me here. God damn it. I think it's got to be Metal Gear. I really do. If I'm being real.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Metal Gear on, Wii Sports off.
Mhm.
As sad as I am to see it go. Now, I've only got one more game that I had written down ahead of time. And it's not a game that I am super sold on myself, I have to admit, but I think that it's worth an argument, and it's Pong.
Yeah. So this is the whole iterative argument again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
I mean, Pong as a genre, like, it influenced Breakout, basically nothing else, but its influence on gaming as a hobby, as a entertainment industry was pretty big.
Was it as big as Pac-Man though?
yeah.
No, I don't think so. So
Like
maybe yeah.
Yeah, heritage-wise, definitely Pong would. I mean, it was one of the earliest games that really did have an impact in terms of being out on the market, getting people interested in what video games were. Pac-Man, though, probably had an even bigger impact, an even wider impact.
It was the first major
worldwide.
commercial success in video games, really, that got highly publicized outside of, the people who were the niche audience at that time. So it's when the world sort of, sat up and took notice that, hey, video games could be a thing in the future. So, yeah, I think they are both quite comparable in terms of influence at that time, and Pac-Man wins out in my mind because of that aspect.
Yeah. I'll give it to Pac-Man as occupying the similar kind of niche. So Pac-Man it is, Pong not staying. Did you guys have any others written down?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm just trying to think about how they would rank up to what else we've got on the list. So one of the big ones that I was considering was Grand Theft Auto 3. Because in terms of...
I did consider that one too, actually, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of being like an open sandbox and really sort of setting the scene for those games to come, that was kind of the first big one. And, given how successful Rockstar has kind of, gone on to be after the fact, that's definitely one worth noting. I don't know if it competes with the others on the list, though, in terms of how important they are.
GTA 3, it definitely, for open world games, had a massive influence. And it does also attract, like GTA still today attracts an audience that is, one sort of Venn diagram to the right of the standard, like, core gamer. Like, you see people who GTA 5 is basically all they play.
I mean, you could make an argument for GTA 5 because it's one of the highest grossing earning video games of all time.
But that's where I think when you're within a franchise, that's where I think the heritage thing kind of does need to be acknowledged. Personally,
yeah.
It's tough though, because the reason why GTA 5 is one of I think it's actually the highest recorded earner in terms of video games of all time. But in my mind, the reason why that is the case is because they've kind of cheated a little bit and they've released versions of it on different platforms in a way that really encourages people to buy the core game multiple times, as opposed to the actual number of people buying it being an increased number. And you could argue that Minecraft actually could be bigger, but it's not recorded. So there's a lot of sales of that game, particularly early on when it was in beta, that weren't actually tracked in the same way that the commercial sales have been since. And if that was all, able to be read as a combined set of data, I think that Minecraft would probably be on top. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. The only other game that I thought of that was worthy of discussion was going back to your comment about StarCraft. I think that, the RTS genre is a huge genre and probably worth mentioning because it has gone on to spawn a lot of other sort of things as well. I mean, the original real-time strategy games, without them, we wouldn't have had Warcraft 3, so we wouldn't have had World of Warcraft. The origins of those games have gone on to create the MOBA genre, so we wouldn't have Dota 2 and League of Legends without some of those early games as well. And in terms of the impact on esports, that's huge. But a lot of that drives back home to the Command & Conquer franchise, I think, and I would have put CNC as one of the big contenders on that list as well. So
I would have said Warcraft instead of CNC.
Yeah.
I would have said Red Alert
Warcraft
instead
2.
of CNC.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think that you could probably argue any of those. I mean, Dune 2 is obviously before all that stuff, but for the same reason, it's the iterative thing. Like, I think more people knew Command & Conquer than Dune 2 for sure, even though that was the first game to, fully incorporate, building structures and the fog of war and using the mouse and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. The fact that we're all thinking a different game maybe indicates that this is one that we shouldn't have on the list.
Yeah, I think that, like, the RTS evolution is kind of this organic thing that happened in the 90s, and there were multiple games which influenced it. And I don't think there was like this one huge standout that just towered above the rest. So I kind of think that, yeah, and it's compared to the other games on the list, I wouldn't pick one of those to go on top 10. But interesting to mention.
All right, I have one more that I want to throw in before we run too long. And I am going to pitch Zork. Okay?
I don't even know what Zork is.
You don't? Holy shit, dude.
God, we're showing our age now, but look.
Okay. All right, so you know what MUDs are, right? So,
yes.
Okay, so they're heavy text-based adventure games. They basically, a lot of it comes back to a very, very old game called Colossal Cave Adventure, or Adventure for short. So that was a text adventure game that was...
I know Adventure,
yeah. You know Adventures. That was way back sort of mid-70s. I think it was mid to late 70s. Now, that game kind of spawned an entire genre of text-based adventure games that later became games, built in the multi-user dungeon or multi-user domain sort of style. A lot of, massive multiplayer servers that were based around people playing these text adventures. I myself spent about 3 or 4 years during high school playing religiously every night on MUDs in the same way that people played World of Warcraft when that first launched. Like, I was freaking involved to the point where I was coding areas of the game to add on as a community collaborative effort. It was huge. But a lot of that style of game went on to influence the early style of text-based adventure games that were taught in schools as like the rudimentary game design principles. It went on to inform games like Zork, which was the first iteration of that kind of a big sort of open area exploration adventure game was done in all text. And Zork went on to become an entire series of Zork games. It went on to breed Myst. It went on to breed a whole bunch of other games that pioneered the use of FMV to tell stories in that kind of puzzle-solving sort of exploration environment. So it's again another argument for a progenitor of a lot of that stuff, but I think that it sort of stands out enough on its own as a brand as well. Does it hang with the others on the list? That's a tough one. I think people who have been born maybe 10 years later than me wouldn't agree. So that's maybe where you and I, Christian, are going to differ a little bit. Not that there's that gap between us, but we're talking about different decades at least. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
I mean, in terms of that industry, it's kind of the same ballpark as Pong, I'd probably say. Like it had a major impact, but is it remembered as much? I don't know. Maybe something after that probably had a bigger impact. Probably all the LucasArts stuff, for example, just in terms of story-driven, turn-based, that sort of thing. But would it make the top 10? Probably not.
So Christian, push it off to the side and put it on a separate list called Old Man Luke, and we can talk about that at a later date.
Look, okay. If that's what you think is old, I've got another one just for you guys. I've got 3 other games I could potentially get maybe in the top 20, probably not a top 10, but I'll throw them out here. Adventure, because without adventure, you never have Easter eggs in video games.
Yep, true.
Gran Turismo, because Gran Turismo influenced simulated racing games, not just arcade racing games, which had been the previous 10, 15 years of development of video games and arcades. And just for fun, Kirby, because without Kirby, you won't have Smash Brothers.
That's true.
I could live with that.
Don't think any of those will make the top 10, but they
Of those games, I would think maybe Adventure would be the first place amongst those 3.
Yep.
It fails the argument though of the progenitor versus the game that's actually influential on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then again, was mentioned in Ready Player One, the movie and the book. So
True.
No, maybe not.
Well, we'll wrap up soon. I just want to pitch one more that's come to me, and I'm actually gonna argue for this one, and it's Pokemon first generation games, Red, Blue, Green, because the monster catcher genre, or like this sort of kids focused JRPG genre, and Pokemon as a mega franchise. Like I saw something the other day that was talking about that Pokemon has made many times more money than Harry Potter has as an entertainment franchise, something in the order of $200 billion compared to $30 billion. And I mean, it's movies, it's games, it's anime, it's toys, it's memorabilia, it's everything. And it's like Pikachu is one of the most recognizable characters, in the world. along with like Mario. And I don't know. I think that Pokemon is a mega franchise that started with that first generation and exploded.
Here's my argument against that. What did it influence?
I mean, so its anime influenced a whole bunch of things. It influenced Yu-Gi-Oh! It influenced Beyblades and Digimon, Bakugan, all sorts of things. And the games, like you had Monster Rancher, you had the Digimon games, you had there's other stuff out there. There's a YouTube channel called Mother's Basement who recently put out like a Digimon versus Pokemon video, and he kind of goes into a bit of this. And I don't know. I think that it even if it's for games didn't have a huge impact for the industry. I think it did. But I don't know. What's your take, Luke?
I think the trick with this one is that the huge amount of influence is derived by the TV series as well. And that's where the argument kind of falters a little bit for me, because I don't think you can point to the game exclusively. So I agree that Pokemon as a franchise is huge, but I think it spans far beyond video games, and we're kind of talking about video games here. In terms of influential video games, this kind of, because you're touching on the JRPG genre a little bit, I think you've got to look back at other things like, Final Fantasies, and actually, no, probably not even that. Probably early Zeldas, Dragon Quest, that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
All right. Okay. I mean, that's one that flame's going to burn in my heart. I do think it deserves the spot on there, but I'm outnumbered here. So I'll run through our top 10 again then, and we'll just have a last call. So we've got Doom, Super Mario Bros, Fortnite, Minecraft, Pac-Man, Metal Gear Solid, Street Fighter 2, Angry Birds, Counter-Strike, Tetris. Last call.
That does sound pretty solid, but there might actually be one we're missing that could be influential. Super Mario 64.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
That's actually a pretty big one. I mean, no, Mario Brothers is on there, but Mario 64 was the first 3D design video game that worked. Obviously, they tried it before a little bit. The N64 really did take it to a whole new level, and the influence of that was almost as wide-ranging as Mario Brothers itself.
If this was top 5 games that influenced me, it would be in the top 10. It would be in the top maybe 2 or 3 games that influenced me. That's for sure. And I can see the effect it had on like the 3D platform genre and just 3D graphics in general. I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
I think there might be a better case for it than Fortnite, if I'm being honest. Because Fortnite's a tough one because we actually haven't seen the full sort of course that's taken yet. Like, you don't know. Like, this thing's been huge for the last year, but there could be something that rises up to take its place in the next couple of months that we haven't anticipated, because it came out of nowhere itself. So
then again, Fortnite has had a much bigger influence than Metal Gear Solid.
It has, did you say?
I think so.
Oh, no, I don't agree with that at all. I don't know. It's too early to tell.
I like the point you make about how we're in the middle of Fortnite, so we kind of maybe we take Fortnite off just to kind of hedge a little bit.
It's tough. I think we could look back on this in a few years and go, why the hell didn't we leave Fortnite on that list? We're crazy. But because we're right in the middle, we're in the eye of the storm at the moment. We just can't tell. So it's hard. We're prognosticating if we leave it on there, essentially.
I guess the problem with Fortnite is probably because it is based off the Battle Royale genre, and that in itself is the most influential part of the industry right now. So it's maybe not just Fortnite.
Exactly, and that's my concern, because I think that we are at this point where the Battle Royale genre has peaked already. So, yeah.
No, okay, that's fair.
All right, I'm gonna raise my digital hand in favor of Super Mario 64 over Fortnite.
Yeah, I'll support that. I think.
All right.
Okay.
So
I'm happy with that too. Okay.
With that change made, I think we've got a pretty good list.
Yeah.
So we may circle back maybe next year or some other time to review this list and see if we want to make any changes. But yeah, Doom, Super Mario Brothers, Minecraft, Pac-Man, Metal Gear Solid, Street Fighter 2, Angry Birds, Counter-Strike, Tetris, Super Mario 64. Decent
I'm
list.
very curious what the rest of the gang are going to say about this list.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd love to read the comments of all the people complaining about Fortnite not being on there now.
Yeah. I'd also like to ask them, which one on the list do they think is the number one spot most influential, and why is it Minecraft?
You mean why is it Super Mario Bros?
Yeah, right? No. We don't have time for this fight tonight.
That was an awesome discussion, guys.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, super.
Yeah, that was fun.
Um,
I had fun with that one.
So if people are really pissed off with our picks, Luke, what can they do to get in touch
They
with
can
us?
fuck right off is what they can do.
Oh, hey.
No,
Or they can come
seriously.
to me. No, sorry.
If they want to give us a list of their grievances, they can send it into mail@partyloaded.com or hit us up on the Twitters at Partyloaded Show. You can find us on Facebook. And of course, if you want to check out our other content, which may be slightly less controversial for the most part, you go to the source. You get it all at channelendgame.com, and you'll find links there to our YouTube, our Twitch channel, and everything else under the sun. So
And Mark's musings.
that's right. Absolutely.
Bugs Musings. Definitely copywriting that. I'm running with it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for hanging with us tonight, Mark. It's been great. Real.
It was
Thanks
awesome.
for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Mm.
I genuinely enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I know I'm going to go away from this chat now and think to myself, God damn it, I should have mentioned this game. It's going to be frustrating.
We will make a sequel podcast in a year's time.
Yeah, look, honestly, in a year's time, I'd be very curious to go back to the Fortnite discussion and see where things are sitting with that. That, in particular, is going to be a very strange one and good to watch. So, yeah, cool. All right, well, thanks for hanging tonight, guys. Now, plans for the next week of gaming. Mark, what are you going to be up to? You going to be Destinying a bit more, or you got something else on the block?
There's a little known game, another little known game called Resident Evil 2 that I'm very curious to play, and I believe it comes out this week.
Have you played the one-shot demo?
I have played the one-shot demo.
Yes.
It scared the pants off of me because I'm not that big of a horror player, but I mean, it's Resident Evil 2. I have to try it, right?
Yep. I have heard that the game is about twice as big as the original in terms of the number of hours of play content. So,
All right.
yeah.
I've heard some crazy stuff from data miners about extra modes and features in that game, but I won't go into it. So
Yeah.
definitely excited.
Yep, I'll be playing that as well. What about you, Christian? What's the next week hold?
More Warframe, and I'm sounding like a broken record now, but I really should start Assassin's Creed Odyssey because I think it's going to strain my relationship if I don't, because my girlfriend got it for me for Christmas, and she keeps saying, why haven't you played the game I got you for Christmas yet? So, yeah.
That's entirely fair. And I did commit to when you start, I'll jump in and play
I know.
as well. So I'm only holding off because you're stopping me, Christian. That's what's going on here. All right. Anyway, we'll see how we go with that. Will Christian actually dig into Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Will Luke actually pull himself out of the Minecraft hole? Stay tuned to next week's episode of the Party Loaded Show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great one, and good night.
Good night.
See ya.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.